Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to tell you about our sponsor, Factor. Factor is a meal service that takes the hassle out of meal prep and planning. Factor's no-hassle prepared meals are designed by dietitians for maximum nutrition and flavor. Unlike other meal services, Factor cooks your meals ahead of time so it arrives ready to heat and eat within minutes. This helps you avoid all of the prep work and cleanup that comes with cooking. But this isn't just some fast food or TV dinner style service. These meals offer fresh, never frozen ingredients across a variety of preferences. They offer traditional meals as well as keto, calorie smart, vegetarian, and vegan. There are over 25 meal options each week, so you'll never get tired of the meals delivered to your door. Personally, the best thing about Factor to me is that it offers convenient nutrition. Nowadays, the only quick options are either unhealthy fast food or overprocessed, stale-tasting frozen dinners. Factor's meals ensure you always have something nutritious and delicious on hand. It saves time for prep, cooking, and cleanup. It gives you time back to focus on the things that you love to do. So give Factor a try today. Use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use the code POGPWPDEC60 for 60% off of your first box. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. When you give them a try, you help support us to continue offering you all great content, like tonight's game, so thanks! Tonight we are playing No Ban List CEDH. Our Mox Pros wanted to try out the power of No Ban List, so they threw some decks together and we will see how they do tonight. So, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Zach piloting Mairsil the Pretender with Lutri the Spellchaser as the companion. This is a Grixis turbo list that tries to resolve either Grizzlebrand or Yawgmoth's Bargain, draw a ton of cards, and win the game. Zach's opening hand contains a City of Brass, Flooded Strand, Yawgmoth's Bargain, Entomb, Mystical Tutor, Dockside Extortionist, and an Underworld Breach. Next, we have Ryan piloting the partner pair of Rograkh, Son of Rograkh, and Silas Seeker Adept with Lutri the Spellchaser as the companion. This is a turbo ad nauseum list that attempts to win as fast as possible, usually on turn 1 or 2. Ryan's opening hand contains a Deflecting Swat, Wheel of Misfortune, Mana Vault, Ancient Tomb, Vampiric Tutor, Springleaf Drum, and his London Mulligan is a Polluted Delta. After that, we have Philip piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Thrasios Triton Hero. This is a Flash Hulk deck seeking to use Flash to cheat Protean Hulk onto the battlefield, then have it fetch up a game-winning combo. Philip's opening hand contains an Enlightened Tutor, Hallowed Fountain, Mox Jet, Voltaic Key, Entomb, and his London Mulligans are Scrubland and Elvish Spirit Guide. Finally, we have Chad piloting Golos, Tireless Pilgrim with Lutri the Spellchaser as the companion. This is a 5-color good stuff pile that seeks to win quickly through Time Vault combo, Flash Hulk, or other quick combos. Chad's opening hand contains an Arid Mesa, Lotus Petal, Channel, Chrome Mox, Esper Sentinel, Viscera Seer, and a Soul Ring. Without further ado, let's kick off this big bad bankrupt band bonanza. Zach won the Blind Tattoo Art Contest and gets to start us off. Zach draws a card for turn and plays a City of Brass. He passes. Ryan draws a card for turn and starts off by paying 2 life to cast Gitaxian Probe targeting Zach. He looks at Zach's hand and draws a card. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He taps it to help cast Mana Vault. He casts his commander, Rograkh, Son of Rograkh. He casts a Springleaf Drum. Ryan passes. Philip draws and casts Mox Jet. He plays a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. Philip ends his turn. Chad draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He casts a Lotus Petal. He cracks his Arid Mesa, pays a life, and realizes he didn't put the right dual land into his deck. So unfortunately, he instead fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts an Esper Sentinel. In response, Zach taps the City of Brass to cast Entomb. In response, Ryan casts Vampiric Tutor. In response, Philip casts an Entomb of his own. The table jokes about how good Opposition Agent would be right now, but there are no answers. Philip fetches up a Grizzlebrand into his graveyard. Then Ryan fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Then Zach fetches up a Grizzlebrand into his graveyard as well. Then finally, Esper Sentinel resolves. Chad casts a Soul Ring and gives the turn to Zach. During his upkeep, Zach taps his City of Brass to cast Mystical Tutor. Esper triggers and Chad draws. He fetches up a Reanimate onto the top of his library. He draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Reanimate targeting Philip's Grizzlebrand in his graveyard. It enters and Zach loses 8 life. Zach activates Grizzlebrand, paying 7 life, drawing 7 cards. He activates Grizzlebrand, paying 7 life, drawing 7 more. He activates it a 3rd time, paying 7 life, drawing 7 cards. Zach casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Black Lotus. He cracks his Lotus for 3 red. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters and Zach creates 5 treasures. He casts Witchclaw Talisman. He casts Cabal Ritual with Threshold, adding 5 black. He activates Witchclaw, fetching up a card into his hand and giving Witchclaw to Chad. He casts a Time Vault. It enters the battlefield tapped. He casts a Voltaic Key. He activates Voltaic Key, targeting his Time Vault. In response, Ryan casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting the Voltaic Key activation. Esper triggers and Chad draws. In response, Zach casts Dispel, countering Swat. Then Key resolves and Time Vault untaps. Zach taps Time Vault, getting an extra turn. Zach presents a loop of taking infinite turns and attacking each player with Grizzlebrand. He does this until the table is dead, and Zach wins the game. Look, there's fast, and then there's no banned list fast. So the team shuffled up and win again. In this game, Ryan brings back Rograkh and Silas, and his opening hand contains a Mox Diamond, Mana Confluence, Bloodstained Mire, Necropotence, Cabal Ritual, and his London Mulligans are Jeska's Will and Daze. Philip brings back Tymna and Thrasios, and his opening hand contains an Ottawara Soaring City, an Offer You Can't Refuse, Bayou, Hull Breacher, and his London Mulligans are Hermit Druid, Grand Abolisher, and Whir of Invention. Chad brings back Golos, and his opening hand contains a Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Time Vault, Mana Vault, Badlands, Chrome Mox, and a Snap. Zach brings back Mairsil, and his opening hand contains a Verdant Catacombs, Mox Sapphire, Mana Vault, Mental Misstep, Entomb, Brain Freeze, and a Yawgmoth's Bargain. And Ryan gets to start us off. Ryan draws and starts off his turn by casting his commander, Rograkh, son of Rograkh. He plays a Mana Confluence for turn. He casts a Mox Diamond, discarding Bloodstained Mire. He taps his Mana Confluence to help cast Cabal Ritual, adding 3 black. He casts Necropotence. He activates Necropotence 30 times, paying 30 life, exiling 30 cards. He moves to his end step and puts the Necro cards into his hand. He passes, discarding to hand size, exiling the discarded cards. Philip draws and plays an Ottawara Soaring City. He passes. Chad draws and casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts his commander, Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. It enters, and Chad fetches up a Cascading Cataracts onto the battlefield tapped. He plays a Badlands for turn. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Snap. Chad passes to Zach. Zach draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He casts Mox Sapphire. He casts a Mana Vault. Zach ends his turn. Ryan skips his draw step due to Necropotence. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Mox Jet. He casts a Mox Opal. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Wishclaw Talisman. In response, Philip casts an Offer You Can't Refuse. Wishclaw is countered, and Ryan creates 2 treasures. Unfortunately thwarted, Ryan must now come up with another plan. So Ryan pays 3 to put Lutri into his hand. He casts Diabolic Intent, sacrificing Rograkh as an additional cost. He holds priority and taps his Mana Confluence to flash in Lutri the Spell Chaser. In response, Chad casts Flusterstorm with all copies targeting Diabolic Intent. Intent is countered, then Lutri resolves, but has no valid targets. Ryan activates Necropotence 4 times, paying 4 life, exiling 4 cards. He moves to his end step, putting the Necro cards into his hand. Ryan ships the turn to Philip. Philip draws and plays a Bayou. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Philip ends his turn. During his upkeep, Chad loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his Mana Vault. He plays a Karakas for turn. He activates Karakas, bouncing Lutri back to Ryan's hand. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Golos. Ryan takes it, and in his second main phase, Chad casts a Time Vault. He pays 3 to put Lutri into his hand. Chad gives the turn to Zach. At the end of Chad's turn, Zach cracks his Verdant Catacombs, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Entomb. He fetches up a Grizzlebrand into his graveyard. The turn moves to Zach. Zach draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Badlands onto the battlefield. He casts Yawgmoth's Bargain. He activates Yawgmoth's Bargain 10 times, paying 10 life, drawing 10 cards. He activates it again, paying 10 life, drawing 10 more. He casts Black Lotus. He activates Bargain, paying 4 life, drawing 4 cards. He casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Mystic Remora. He activates Bargain, paying 2 life, drawing 2 cards. He cracks his Lotus, adding 3 black. He casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He activates Bargain, paying a life and drawing a card. He casts a Felwar Stone. He casts a Dramatic Reversal, untapping his non-land permanents. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Zach creates 12 treasures. On turn 2, he casts Thassa's Oracle. It enters, and with the trigger on the stack, he casts Demonic Consultation. Consultation resolves, and Zach names Shahrazad, exiling his library. Oracle's trigger resolves, and Zach wins the game. In this game, Philip brings back Tymna and Thrasios, and his opening hand contains a Flash, Mystic Remora, Vampiric Tutor, Whirlwind Denial, Dramatic Reversal, Verdant Catacombs, and his London Mulligan is a Grand Abolisher. Chad brings back Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, and his opening hand contains a Black Lotus, Spellseeker, Elvish Spirit Guide, Fierce Guardianship, Flash, Volcanic Island, and his London Mulligan is a Thassa's Oracle. Zach brings back Mairsil, and his opening hand contains a Force of Negation, Gemstone Caverns, Demonic Tutor, Underground Sea, Mox Ruby, an Offer You Can't Refuse, and a Gifts Ungiven. Ryan brings back Rograkh and Silas, and his opening hand contains a Mystical Tutor, Mox Ruby, Wishclaw Talisman, Mox Opal, Grim Monolith, Rite of Flame, and a Tinker. And Philip gets to start us off. But Zach has a pre-game action and puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling Force of Negation. Philip draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts a Mystic Remora. He passes. Chad draws and plays a Volcanic Island. He casts a Black Lotus. Remora triggers and Philip draws. He cracks his Lotus for 3 blue. He casts Spellseeker. It enters and he fetches up a Summoner's Pact into his hand. He casts Summoner's Pact and Philip draws from Remora. In response, Philip casts Force of Negation for its alternate cost, exiling a blue card, countering and exiling Summoner's Pact. When attempt thwarted, Chad passes. Zach draws and starts off his turn by casting Mox Ruby, and Philip draws from Remora. He plays a City of Traders. Zach ends his turn. Ryan draws and stares at Mystic Remora. He casts a Chrome Mox and Philip draws. It enters and Ryan imprints Tinker. Ryan passes. During his upkeep, Philip lets his Remora die. He draws and plays a Scrubland. He casts Flash. In response, Chad exiles Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a red and a green. He hard casts Fierce Guardianship, countering Flash. Philip sends the turn over to Chad. Chad draws and moves to combat. He attacks Zach with Spellseeker. Zach takes it and Chad passes. At the end of Chad's turn, Zach casts Gifts Ungiven, targeting Ryan. He fetches up a Grizzlebrand and fetches up an Entomb. Ryan has both go to the graveyard. The turn moves to Zach. Zach draws and floats mana through City of Traders. He plays an Underground Sea, sacrificing City of Traders. He casts Demonic Tutor. He fetches up a card into his hand. He casts Animate Dead. It resolves and Zach puts Grizzlebrand onto the battlefield. He activates Grizzlebrand, paying 7 life, drawing 7 cards. He activates Grizzlebrand, paying 7 life, drawing 7 more. He casts a Mox Jet. He casts a Rite of Flame, adding 2 red. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Tainted Pact. He activates Grizzlebrand 3 more times, paying 21 life, drawing 21 cards. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts Underworld Breach. He cracks his LED, discards his hand, adding 3 blue. He escapes LED. He cracks it for 3 black. He escapes LED again. He escapes Thassa's Oracle. It enters, and with the trigger on the stack, he escapes Tainted Pact. Tainted Pact resolves, and Zach exiles his library. Oracle's trigger resolves, and Zach wins the game. Again. In this game, Chad brings back Golos, and his opening hand contains a Jeweled Lotus, Simian Spirit Guide, Rhystic Study, Verdant Catacombs, and his London Mulligans are Tolarian Academy, Tenderwall, and Abrupt Decay. Zach brings back Mairsil, and his opening hand contains a Gemstone Caverns, Dockside Extortionist, Steam Vents, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Lion's Eye Diamond, and a Tainted Pact. Ryan brings back Rograkh and Silas, and his opening hand contains a Yawgmoth's Bargain, Rite of Flame, Ad Nauseam, Flooded Strand, Grim Monolith, Bloodstained Mire, and his London Mulligan is a Tinker. Philip brings back Tymna and Thrasios, and his opening hand contains a Demonic Tutor, Mana Confluence, Mox Pearl, and his London Mulligans are Mox Opal, City of Brass, Ancestral Recall, and Overgrown Tomb. And Chad gets to start us off. But Zach has a pre-game action and puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling Dockside Extortionist, which has everyone reeling about just how good his hand must be. Chad draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Tropical Island onto the battlefield. He casts Jeweled Lotus. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a red. He cracks his Lotus to help cast his commander, Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. It enters, and Chad fetches up an Ancient Tomb onto the battlefield tapped. Chad passes. Zach draws and plays a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. He casts a Tainted Pact. He holds priority and cracks his Lion's Eye Diamond, discards his hand, adding 3 black. He then exiles until he finds Yawgmoth's Bargain, putting it into his hand. He casts Yawgmoth's Bargain. He activates Bargain 10 times, paying 10 life, drawing 10 cards. He activates Bargain, paying 8 life, drawing 8 cards. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Mox Ruby. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Show and Tell. He casts an Arcane Signet. He casts Time Walk, getting an extra turn. He passes, discarding to hand size. Zach moves to his extra turn. During his upkeep, Zach wins his Mana Crypt roll. He skips his draw step due to Yawgmoth's Bargain. He casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He activates Bargain, paying a life, drawing a card. He casts Underworld Breach. He casts a Manifold Key. He activates Manifold Key, untapping his Arcane Signet. He floats mana and then casts Dramatic Reversal, untapping his non-land permanents. He escapes Brain Freeze, with all copies targeting himself. He mills some of his library, then escapes Brain Freeze again, milling the rest of his library. He escapes Lion's Eye Diamond. He cracks it, discards his hand, and adds 3 blue. He escapes Thassa's Oracle. Oracle enters, and with a trigger on the stack, he escapes Tainted Pact, exiling his library. Oracle's trigger resolves, and you know what, let's go into the next game. In this game, Zach brings back Mairsil, and his opening hand contains a Spire of Industry, Lotus Petal, Mox Ruby, Rhystic Study, Pyroblast, Underworld Breach, and a Show and Tell. Ryan brings back Rograkh and Silas, and his opening hand contains a Mox Jet, Calling the Weak, Grizzlebrand, Command Tower, Soul Ring, Brain Freeze, and a Daze. Philip brings back Tymna and Thrasios, and his opening hand contains a City of Brass, Soul Ring, Rhystic Study, and his London Mulligans are Voltaic Key, Fierce Guardianship, Tolarian Academy, and a Grizzlebrand. Chad brings back Golos, and his opening hand contains a Simian Spirit Guide, Soul Ring, Time Twister, Windswept Teeth, Time Vault, Mana Vault, and a Pyroblast. And Zach gets to start us off. Zach draws and plays a Spire of Industry. He casts a Mox Ruby. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Rhystic Study. Zach passes. Ryan draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts his commander, Rograkh, son of Rograkh. Rhystic triggers and Zach draws. He casts a Mox Jet and Zach draws from Rhystic. He casts a Soul Ring and Zach draws. Ryan ends his turn. Philip draws and plays a City of Brass. He taps it to cast a Soul Ring. Zach draws from Rhystic and Philip passes to Chad. Chad draws and exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a red. He casts Pyroblast, targeting Rhystic Study. Study triggers and Zach draws. In response, Zach pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep. In response, Ryan casts Daze, targeting Misstep, paying the Rhystic tax. Daze counters Misstep, and with Pyroblast still on the stack, Zach casts Force of Negation for its alternate cost, exiling a blue card, countering and exiling Pyroblast. Next, Chad plays a Windswept Teeth. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts a Soul Ring, and Zach draws from Rhystic. He casts a Mana Vault, and Zach draws. He casts a Manifold Key, and Zach draws. He casts a Time Vault. Rhystic triggers, and Zach draws. Unfortunately, Zach has no answers, and Time Vault resolves. Chad activates Manifold Key, untapping his Time Vault. He taps his Time Vault to take an extra turn. Chad presents a loop of taking infinite turns through Time Vault, untapping his Mana Vault to avoid damage, then casting Golos, paying the Rhystic tax. He then attacks each opponent with Golos over and over until they are dead, and Chad wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what can we say? We love playing no ban list CEDH. Too frequently, we think something should come off the ban list. However, I believe that many of us become so far removed that we don't realize just how powerful these cards really are in practice. Fun fact about this evening, not a single game went past turn 2. Congrats to Zach and Chad on their wins tonight. We saw from both decks the power of Time Vault, Grizzlebrand, and Yawgmoth's Bargain. We had a blast playing tonight, and we hope you enjoyed watching it. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like this, be sure to subscribe. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.